On August 15th, 1977, a radio telescope in Ohio picked up a signal from deep space that lasted exactly 72 seconds. The astronomer who found it circled it in red pen and wrote one word in the margin. Wow. That single word became the most famous annotation in the history of science, and for 46 years, the official story has been the same. We heard something, we never heard it again, and we never responded. That last part is a lie. The Big Ear telescope was not supposed to be operational that night. It had been scheduled for maintenance. The technician who overrode that schedule, a man whose name does not appear in any official NASA record, left a single note in the facility logbook before his shift began. The note read, "Tonight we listen on frequency 1420. That frequency, known as the hydrogen line, is the one frequency that every civilization in the universe capable of mathematics would know to use. It is the frequency of the most common element in existence. Whoever sent the wow signal knew exactly where we would be listening." The signal itself lasted 72 seconds, not because it stopped, but because that was exactly how long it took for the Earth's rotation to carry the telescope out of alignment with its source. The signal was continuous. We were the ones who moved. When astronomer Jerry Amon found it 3 days later in the printout data, he described a feeling he could not explain, as though the numbers on the page were looking back at him. He framed it as a figure of speech. The people who came to see him 2 weeks later did not. Within 72 hours of Amon's annotation being reported internally, 3 men arrived at the Big Ear facility. They did not identify themselves by name. They carried credentials that the facility director later described as unlike any government identification he had seen before. Not NASA, not military, not any agency whose acronym he recognized. They spent 4 hours alone in the data room. When they left, 17 minutes of that night's recordings were missing from the tape archive. The gap has never been explained. What happened in those 4 hours, and what was on those 17 missing minutes, remained unknown until 2019, when a former signals analyst at a facility in Virginia submitted a 340-page document to a private research organization 3 days before his death. He had worked for a branch of the U.S. government that officially has never existed, and what he described in those 340 pages was not a mystery. It was a decision. Humanity had already responded to the wow signal. The response had been authorized by a single man, without congressional oversight, without public knowledge, and without any certainty of what would happen next. The document, which the research organization has never publicly released in full, begins with a date. September 4th, 1977. 20 days after the wow signal was received. On that date, according to the analyst's account, a response transmission was sent from a facility outside Anchorage, Alaska, a facility whose existence was declassified in 2003 under a different name and a different stated purpose. The transmission lasted exactly 72 seconds, the same duration as the original signal. This was not a coincidence. It was a deliberate mirroring, a mathematical signal that said in the most universal language possible, "We received you, and we understand structure." The man who authorized the response was not the president. He was not the head of NASA. He held a position that does not appear in any public organizational chart of the U.S. government. A position the analyst refers to throughout the document only as the coordinator. According to the account, the coordinator had held this role since 1961, the year of the first Soviet human spaceflight, and his entire mandate was a single contingency. If contact occurs, respond before it can be politicized. He believed, apparently with some conviction, that the window between first contact and governmental paralysis would be measured in days. He was not willing to lose that window. The response transmission contained 3 components. The first was the mirrored duration, 72 seconds, to confirm reception. The second was a mathematical sequence, prime numbers, expressed in binary, ascending from 2 to 89. This is the sequence that SETI researchers had long theorized would be the most universally recognizable proof of intelligent origin. The third component has never been fully described in the document. The analyst refers to it only as the attachment, and notes that its inclusion was not authorized by the coordinator. Someone added it without approval. The analyst spent 11 years trying to find out who. We spoke with a former contractor who worked at the Anchorage facility between 1975 and 1981. She agreed to speak on the condition that we not identify the specific program she worked under. Her account corroborates the analyst's document on several key points. The existence of a September 1977 transmission, the presence of personnel she did not recognize and could not clear through standard channels, and one detail that does not appear anywhere in the 340-page document. On the night of the transmission, she says, every clock in the facility stopped for approximately 4 minutes. Not the electronics, the analog clocks, the ones with hands. The coordinator died on March 3, 1978, 6 months after the response was sent. The official cause of death was cardiac arrest. He was 54 years old, and his medical history did not indicate any heart conditions. 2 men arrived at his home to collect his personal belongings, even before his family had been notified of his death. His documents, correspondence, and the contents of the safe in his home office were never found. His name does not appear in any obituary or government registry. The analyst's document contains a single photograph of him. It is a copy with a partially scorched corner. He is standing in front of a structure resembling an antenna array. He is smiling. The caption at the bottom, written by someone other than the analyst, indicates that he was aware of the contents of the attachment. The analyst's document does not reveal what the attachment contained. It does describe its effect. In the weeks following the September 1977 transmission, 7 members of the team that had been present at the Anchorage facility requested immediate psychiatric evaluation. Not because they were unstable, because they had all begun experiencing the same dream. Not similar dreams, the same dream, with the same sequence of events in the same order every night. They reported it independently, without knowledge that the others were reporting it. In the dream, they were standing in an empty room with no walls, and something was reading them. Not their thoughts, but something deeper than thoughts. The analyst's final conclusion, written on the last page of the document and underlined 3 times, is this: the wow signal was not a first contact. It was a response. Whatever sent it had been watching us long enough to know our listening frequency before we did. The 1977 signal was not them reaching out. It was them acknowledging that they had noticed us noticing them, and the attachment, the unauthorized addition to our response, was in the analyst's assessment. The single most dangerous thing a human being has ever transmitted into space. Not because of what it said, because of what it asked. We do not know what the attachment asked. The analyst destroyed that section of the document before submitting it, and explained why in a single sentence that precedes the gap. Some questions, once transmitted across the distance between civilizations, cannot be withdrawn. What we do know is this: in 2020, The Parkes radio telescope in Australia detected a signal originating not from deep space, but from the direction of Proxima Centauri, the closest star system to our own. It lasted long enough to be recorded. It has not repeated. It has not been explained. And its frequency was 982 megahertz, exactly 69.2% of the hydrogen line, the same ratio as the mathematical sequence embedded in the unauthorized attachment. This is not in any public report. It is in a private correspondence between two researchers, one of whom forwarded it to us before deleting their email account. There is a version of this story in which everything described in this video is a fabrication, a dying man's document, an anonymous contractor's memory, a mathematical coincidence in a radio frequency. That version is possible. It may even be likely. But there is another version, and it requires only one thing to be true: that in September 1977, someone added something to our message without authorization, and that whatever received that message has been calculating its response ever since. The wow signal lasted 72 seconds. Our response lasted 72 seconds. If the pattern holds, and if the 2020 detection was their acknowledgement, then we are no longer waiting for first contact. First contact has a schedule, and the next transmission is not ours to send.